Good shot, kid. I think you got him. Good shot, kid. I think you got him.
Hello there, and welcome back to some more Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Today we're continuing on with Let's Play. This is episode 55. In today's episode, we're going to another school as we take a look at the boat school, one of the most unknown schools out of the sort of four in game. The two you do in the storyline, these two you don't really do, this and bike school. It's a fine boat school. It is here in the sleepy seaside village of Bayside. It's sort of in a cabin just off one of the ports, and I have to say this is the easiest by far of all of the schools. The first test is Basic Seamanship. Essentially the way to do this is pretty simple, just brake early, sort of in between the first and second buoys, and you'll be alright. Now, unlike in flight school, which had 10 tests I believe, and driving school, which had 12, this only has 5. So, yeah, that's part of this being easy. The other part of this being easy is the time limits are incredibly generous, I find. Test number 2 is called Plot a Course. This one, again, incredibly easy. If you hold R1, you can perform a sharp turn in the boat. There's a few times you might need to do that during this test, but to be honest with you, even if you don't, I think the time limit on this one is like 40 seconds, and it is very easy to get this one done in about 30 seconds. So again, another very simple test. Boats are very easy to drive, and they do give you optimal weather conditioning as well during this, which is nice. They sort of make it very clear, the waves aren't out, which is interesting. You'd expect them to sort of teach you about how to deal with the waves and how they affect the boat's handling, but they don't for some reason, so I'm not going to complain. Next up we have the Fresh Slalom. This one is performed on the dinghy. I would recommend changing camera angles. I can't remember if I do that in this, because the camera angle on the dinghy is incredibly close for whatever reason. The bumper camera, that's just sort of the way it goes. So if you use the second camera option, then that's the best. I always use the closest camera option because I find that's the most comfortable in this game. In Vice City, I believe I relied more on the, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it, the moderate, because you have close, sort of far, and very far, I guess would be the way the game would describe it. I use the far camera view in Vice City. In this game I use the close camera view because you can move the camera around in this game, so it's pretty easy to sort of see what you're driving towards, and it's just easy to use that, if that makes sense. Another point I should mention is there is actually no damage in boat schools. You can hit these buoys and it won't matter, so that's good. You can waste yourself, as I found out in one of the later tests. If you sort of hit one just right and capsize, it will actually waste you and send you to the Fort Carson Hospital, which is a bit of an inconvenience. But I mean, you saw there, look, there's 2 minutes. 2 minutes was the actual sort of beat this course in under 2 minutes time to get bronze, and I did it in 76 seconds. This really is not very difficult whatsoever. One thing that is difficult, however, is this test. The only difficult test I find is flying fish, and that's mainly down to PS2 limitations. So for this test, you need to jump a certain height in the Vortex hovercraft, which is a new vehicle to us. The way to do them is to head towards Ghent Bridge, sort of turn around and get a good run up to a jump. Of course, on the PS2 version, where the draw distance is completely naff, it's very hard to spot where you're actually aiming for until the last minute there, and then you'll screw off speed by making adjustments. In the PC version, Xbox version, whatever, this should be a lot easier because you should be able to see the ramp from a further destination. Also, pull back on the analog stick in order to make the Vortex fly. Vortex is a bit of a weird vehicle by this game's aspect. It's sort of half boat, half plane. And it can also drive on land because it's a hovercraft, so it's a little bit weird. It has the floating properties that an aeroplane would have, and it explodes like an aeroplane. But of course it can run on water and has the sharper turn radius like a boat would. So it's an interesting vehicle, certainly. We'll get to grips more with it as it shows up in a few story missions, but this is our first time seeing it, and yeah, it's a very interesting vehicle. Final test is Siennai. This is the one where if you hit the buoys just right, you can roll the vehicle over and end up to a trip to the hospital, which you don't want to do. Thankfully, if you avoid that though, this is a very simple test. A lot of these, again, it just involves going through the buoys. They spread them decent far apart, and even if you do hit them, as I said before, there's no real damage to it. You can move these things around if you really want to. Occasionally a plane will crash, actually, and move the buoys, as you might have seen. If anyone's a fan of Hugo 1, one of his more famous clips has a plane exploding and actually can move these things in the water, which is interesting, but we didn't have that happen to us, thankfully. So as you can see, this test essentially plots you on a course around Bayside, sort of touching towards San Fierro, the fortress underneath the bridge that used to belong to Jizzy before we smoked his ass. So, and around the boat with all the refugees from that mission that I forgot the name of. Anyways, yeah, it's, again, very simple test. There's not a lot to explain with this school, really. Again, it's very, very simple. It is the easiest school in the game. This bike school, plane school, and then driving school, I find, sort of in that order, the most difficult. And of course, bike school, we will get to that later on in the game. That'll actually be our final school, as we are now at 3 or 4 once we've got our certificate for this. But yeah, you could get gold on this, honestly, without even trying. So it's probably the more useless of all the driving schools. Again, there's no storyline reason to do this, only 400% is the reason to do this, but it's very simple, very easy, and you may as well do it, because why not, I guess. You know, you get to improve your boat skills. You don't get any money for it, and honestly, the prize vehicles aren't really worth it either, as we'll see in a second, but why not? You know, it's something to do, I guess, while you're out here in Bayside. Makes Bayside actually useful. I have a theory they probably didn't even want to put a boat school in the game. They just sort of did because they had nothing else to do with this area. Anyways, if you get all bronzes in boat school, you get access to the Marquee Yacht, which is a returning one from Vice City, and very slow and very pointless. If you get silver, you get the Squallow Speedboat, which is a pretty darn good one. Decent speed. You can find this docked a few places in San Fierro, and finally, if you get all gold, you get the Jetmax, which is definitely docked in a few other places, but it is the best boat in the game in terms of outright speed. And of course, once you come out here as well, you get lovely calm waves, which is wonderful, so you can drive your new prize boat off into the distance. And for me, it's off into the next episode. Thank you all very much for watching. Next time, we are going to be taking a look at the ammunition shooting range, which is not so lovely, so join us for that. Thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, farewell.
Down, speeding all around. The Nike 47 got the power and it's bound to move any mother that gets in my way. Just another power machine on the freeway. Riding with me, there's my MC homeboy. Knowing the rules ain't part of his program. Finding the right way around this map might be pretty hard, cause he's fucked on crack. G, Grand Theft Auto.